All right.
Live streaming.
We're live streaming now. Let's see, September RubyMotion Meetup. We tentatively plan to discuss the following things. Lori's going to give a brief update on her Windex school. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
And give an intro to Derek's summer project. Was Derek your intern?
Yeah.
And he did an AR kit game. So we're going to hear a little bit about that. Amir is going to give an update on Xcode 10 and some RubyMotion internals and open source initiatives, if he gets here in time. And talk about maybe mentioning or discussing some of the Apple announcements that were announced this morning, and give an update on my progress with my reactive components framework. And that's it so far. Anybody's welcome to add anything or give any announcements or ask any questions or suggest that we hack on something. So with that, Lori, do you want to give us an update on how your school's going?
Okay. Really briefly, I finally started adding the motion in motion stuff to the school. So this would be, I'm just transferring the videos over, and I'm starting with the stuff that needs as little updates as possible. And so those are pretty much transfer straight over, and linking in all the source code for it to all the videos. So I've got the first set up. Let me share my screen. So can you see that now?
Yep.
Okay. So we have the Jumpstart. That's the very intro-y course. I have here the Motion in Motion Complete Collection. So this is the holder for all of the Motion in Motion stuff. Eventually, it's all going to be dumped in there. And eventually that price will be going up. So anybody buys now gets everything that ever gets added there at that one price. But as I add things, as I get everything added to it, that price is going to go up. And then as I add new things, it will probably continue to go up. The very first thing is this view controllers in RubyMotion. That's a set of 3 of the videos that Jack did. If we take a look, yeah, you can't see this, but it's just episodes 51, 52, and 53 on view controllers in iOS. So this is like a huge milestone for me. Derek worked all summer long updating all the source code because there's an awful lot of this stuff that was out of date. And just it wouldn't compile, wouldn't run. Stuff was deprecated all over the place. So basically it's all been updated, and it should all run as cleanly as we could make it. There's some warnings and things that I can't get rid of, but so that is the school update. I will be having an announcement soon. And honestly, guys, see this? Enter your email here. Everybody should go and enter their email there, because then you're going to get announcements of things like my webinar for my course that I'm working on right now. That's basically, I call it 6-pack apps, which is basically going from idea to app store in 6 steps. The stuff is like, I know there's a lot of people in the group that have apps and they're all going, whatever. But man, there's a lot of people that just, they dabble, they play, and they never get an app in the app store. So I'm gonna have a course that will hopefully take all those people and get them with apps in the app store in RubyMotion. So then we can all talk more about it. Anyway, so that is, I'll be having a webinar, free webinar on that stuff before the end of September. And then in October, the class will start. And I'm actually doing a live version of that class at the Tech Incubator here in town in Lethbridge, which is a little tiny place. But the Tech Incubator wants me to do it there, so I'm doing it. Okay, so that's really it for this goal. Next thing, this right here is the repo for Derek's game. He worked like a dog on this for a large portion of the summer, considering that he didn't even know Ruby and didn't know shit about iOS development when he started. He's written a really credible little game here where you start in your battleground with 3 demons chasing you, 3 flaming demons chasing you. And you need to shoot the demons. The only problem is every time you miss, it spawns another demon. Oh. So you should not miss. And when you drop to 8 or less bullets, a blue ammo crate will spawn somewhere around you and you have to run for it to pick it up. So it's good to play this game outside, as I discovered as I tried to run through 2 different walls to get an ammo crate one time. He actually has a great little video because he even got video replays going here on, well, you guys probably aren't going to see when I do full screen. So I'll just, I
saw that when you did.
You did? You saw full screen? Okay.
Yeah. So
I'm going to go back to full screen. I don't know if you'll get the sound. It's really awesome. The sound is really awesome. It's very, well, if you don't get the sound, you should go and watch this video because do you hear any sounds?
No, I don't hear any sounds.
No, that's too bad. So anyway, you have to watch all these things coming at you, and he has a pause action too. The hand is just dramatic effects.
It looks pretty cool.
It is really a really cool little game, and he has it set up with like accounts and stuff, so you can just hand off your phone to other people and you can play games with it. Oh, and his ammo crate fell, but he's got demons coming in, so he's got to get rid of those so he can run for the ammo crate now. And he got his paws back and he somehow missed. Oh, and he lost. Okay. No, it does have a few problems, I must say. There's he's way better at it than I am, by the way. I think because he spent all summer playing this game. Anyway, okay, that's it.
That's pretty cool.
I'm gonna stop screen sharing, but how do I stop screen sharing?
Can you show us some of the code that made that possible?
Absolutely. So he has broken it down. It's ARKit and GameKit, and he has agents. He's got a demon agent and survivor. That's like you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got some behaviors. So the demons are supposed to basically move toward you, but every once in a while they jink from side to side, and that's the evade behavior. And you do fun things like, so that's just a game kit behavior, setting up goals, goal to flee the player, goal to avoid agents, like other demons. It tries not to mob the demons all on top of you. So anyway, he's done a really good job of cleaning up. Let's see, entities. There's an entity manager that manages the the demons, and the bullets. The bullets are entities, and the scene view, which is basically your ARKit view. I think he's done a really good job of making it all clear and readable. So like demons are pretty good. It's a GK entity. It's got chasing and flee states. And he's got some geometry here for setting where it sort of randomly spawns and within the scene. And then setting up all the fire stuff, and that's the particle fire. Survivor, that's basically you, the player. Let's go. There is some code that is a little more not entirely great yet. Battleground is a little long methods that could be broken out, I think. But you know what? We were interested in getting the game working, and he has the mini map. I don't know if you saw that down in the corner that was always showing where the demons were around you and where the ammo crate dropped and things like that. So that's pretty cool. He did have a consultation with Amir early on in the game development, and he got some ideas for some of this stuff from Amir, but a lot of it he did just based on his own reading. So yeah,
That's cool. How does everything get kicked off? How does it set it up as an ARKit?
Okay, that would be, is that in the menu? think maybe that was in the battleground thing that I was just in. Yeah, so he's got a location controller there. There we go, which is this is the line 23 here. That's the ARKit scene view. So that sets up your main view. And then AR world tracking configuration, setting up the alignment to be aligned gravity and heading. So when you move, it moves, sort of thing. Yeah, this is the main stuff really, is in the battleground. Now, if you want to see a more basic ARKit example, I'll dig it out. He took one of the, I think it was the Ray Wenderlich's tutorials on using ARKit, and turned it into a little example. That's going to be showing up on my blog in the coming weeks, but I'll share it with you guys if you want to see. And that's basically where he learned the basics of the ARKit stuff. And then he layered in all the game kit stuff on top to do the game. But honestly, I thought for somebody who didn't know anything about Ruby or iOS or game programming or anything when he started, he did all this in 4 months. So
that's pretty cool.
Along with, you know, helping me out on all the motion and motion stuff too. So yeah.
It's impressive.
It was impressive. And I wish he would have come tonight. But I'll tell him to watch this. So you guys give him the virtual thumbs up here. Okay. So now I need to stop screen sharing. How do I stop screen sharing? There we go.
Good job, Derek.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm not going to, beyond going over it here with you guys, I'm not going to advertise this a lot, other than if somebody in the Motioneers group says they're having problems with something like this, I'll point them at it. But eventually this is going to be the basis of another course in my school on how to do ARKit and games.
Cool.
So yeah, this there's a few bugs left in this. Every once in a while, when I'm playing on my Derek developed it all using my old iPhone SE, and every once in a while on my iPhone 10, the demons come at me and I'm dead in 4 seconds, and I have no idea why it does that. And there's a few other hiccups around the recording. Every once in a while, probably about half the time it doesn't record properly. But honestly, pretty mild for bugs for this, considering how many moving parts there are in all this.
Yeah.
So are we still waiting for Amir? He hasn't showed up yet. 5 more minutes.
Did you guys watch the Apple keynote this morning?
Oh yeah.
It's too long for me.
Oh, There's an awesome video on YouTube that Apple posted. It's the keynote in 108 seconds. Just go ahead and watch it now.
All right.
But how about you, Andrew? Did you?
Yeah, I had it running in the background. I don't know. I think at this point they're less and less exciting. It's like, oh, yep, it's another iPhone. It does pretty much the same thing as the last one, and there's some updated specs, but
Updated specs and cool camera stuff, and yeah, it's more powerful, and they do more with it. That's basically,
yeah, I think the more powerful device, especially with their their machine learning stuff and their augmented reality stuff, probably start seeing a lot more new and interesting things because they've got the technology to support it. The Apple Watch has a new heart monitor feature. Is that EKG? Is that what it is?
Yep. EKG.
Like
so that's something on the combination of the sensors and the crown. Something in the crown.
Oh yeah, you gotta hold your finger on the crown while you're doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's to create a loop.
Well, given all the stories I'm hearing about people who have heart problems and suddenly their watch is telling them they have to do something, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And I have to say, personally, that whole falling detection, while some people might not be excited about it, people my age are very excited about it because we all have aging parents that keep falling down. And yeah, that's like super exciting to me because I want my mom to have one of those watches.
Mm-hmm.
She's fallen down 3 times since we moved back to Lethbridge. So I don't know how many times she fell down when we didn't live here. But she needed help getting back up, and we had to run to help her. But I always fear what would happen if I'm not here. So.
Yeah. Hi, Dave. Welcome.
Hi.
Laurie just gave a tutorial on, or shared with us Derek's summer project, creating an AR kit game. That was pretty cool. Now we're transitioning to something new.
Okay, yeah, I just thought I'd check in late here.
What were you going to say, Dan?
Oh, I was just wondering on the new iPhones if the sizes are significantly different, like the pixel sizes or.
They've got some new screens. It took me a little bit to try to figure out what the difference is between the 3 different models that they have now. They've got an iPhone 10 X, no, iPhone 10s is the smaller version, and they've got an iPhone XS Max, which is the bigger version.
Yeah.
And they've got an iPhone XR, which is somewhere in between. The screen is similar to an iPhone.
Okay,
8?
pixel-wise, the XS screen is the same as the or the XS, 10S, whatever you want to call it, is the same pixels as the 10. And of course, the 10S Max is bigger.
Oh, right. Yes.
And the 10R is, of course, annoyingly different.
Yeah, that was the difference that I was trying to figure out, because it's got a different screen.
It's got a different pixel density. So it's not the super retina. But yeah, it's the tall form factor. So that's just going to be annoying yet again. I can't wait to see what sizes of images we're supposed to upload to the App Store now.
Right.
That's the iPhone XS Plus Max. iPhone XS Max. Is that what it's called?
10S Max, yeah.
That one has the screen is a lot bigger, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah.
Is it bigger than the 7 Plus?
Or the 8 Plus? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
In terms of number of pixels. Actually, I think the screen size is bigger too, but I think the important thing is to figure out how many pixels.
Yeah, it's the pixels that count.
Yeah.
Well, for us,
developers.
For developers, I know everybody else cares about it's the pixels I care about.
I just want to know if it can fit in my pocket.
Right.
Oh, well, they had it. They were showing. Now, was it the the 10S Max is smaller than the 7 or 8 Plus, but has a bigger screen.
Okay.
Yeah, because the screen goes to the edges, and there's no home button.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll probably upgrade sometime in the spring.
Yeah, my wife's ready for a new phone. She's got an older one, and we've been waiting for this day to come so that we can know what the pricing changes are going to be on the other models. And
yes, that's my husband has been holding out. He was really hoping for a smaller phone, like, stick with the size wise of the SE, but use the big edge to edge screen.
yeah,
but it was not to be.
I feel similarly. They keep getting bigger. Hey, Mayor.
Hey. What y'all been talking about? Keynote?
Apple Christmas.
Apple X Max. Apple 10 Max.
Right.
They could have just. It would have been funny if they called it plus plus. I would have loved that. Apple 10 plus plus.
That'd
Yeah.
probably be easier to remember.
10 Max.
But
It's
it's
all
10S
about
Max, right?
yeah. It's all
They
about
could have called it
something that can
edition. I
be
mean,
Googled.
Apple 10 edition. I would have taken that.
Edition.
I don't know. I give up, Apple. Who names crap? Who names crap? Naming things. Naming things. So just to, I can talk about stuff unless I'm interrupting.
No, go ahead. We were kind of waiting for you to get here.
I'm sorry, I really am.
No, it's okay. Laura gave a demo of Derek's summer project, the AR game, and gave a brief update on her school, and then we were discussing Papa Christmas, and then
here we are.
figured that you'd be here any moment to share about updates with Xcode 10 and some RubyMotion internals / open source initiatives.
Yes. So Xcode 10 happening or whatever. I posted that deprecation notice inside of the Slack channel. I don't know if y'all saw that. It was at 4:28 today. And most of the stuff in there is not too okay. So a couple of things that are impactful would be OS Mac Xcode no longer supports 32-bit compilation for Mac OS. So yeah, that's a thing. And the biggest impact that RubyMotion has was the 5th bullet point, which says libstdc++. So lib standard was deprecated in Xcode 8.0, but there are potentially CocoaPods out there and gems, RubyMotion gems that depend on CocoaPods that link to standard lib, the deprecated standard lib. So they finally killed that off. And what that means is that those specific CocoaPods and gems that have old versions of Xcode projects or link or refer to older versions of CocoaPods have to be updated in the near future. What I've done on the RubyMotion side is the linking flags and the linkers that are sent to RubyMotion when it comes time for compilation are changed by me. And I changed them to point to the updated libc libraries as opposed to the lib standard C++ libraries. And I print out a warning saying that, hey, you're referencing this thing, which is just gone in Xcode 10. So I'm making it point to this other thing, and you need to figure out where in your dependency hierarchy you're linking to this old thing. God be with you. Let's hope your app runs. And I've attempted this for Gerard and his app contractually, or their app that they have built RubyMotion, and that did work. So just updating the linkers and having it repoint to the correct dynamically linked the dlibs, fix the thing, and the warning is there for them to go down the rabbit hole of their dependency hierarchy to figure out what is actually breaking. The immediate smoking gun seems to be Motion-Fabric, which is the Crashlytics wrapper for RubyMotion. So at some point, again, it works now with the update that I'm going to push out. But at some point, some of those CocoaPods would have to be updated, and those linkers need to be updated. Additionally, if you go to the actual legitimate CocoaPods repo and then do a grep for libc standard, there are still a bunch of CocoaPods out there that link to that dlib, which is a bad thing. A bad thing for anyone that's not using RubyMotion, because their build process will not update that value or warn them that it needs to be updated. It'll just fail in Xcode 10. So just be aware of that you need to look at the CocoaPods that you reference and ensure that no evidence of libstd C++ is in there. And I'll put that in the changelog with regards to how to go about looking through your dependencies and finding that out. And again, you will get a warning that says you're referencing this, and that is a bad thing. So that is the quote unquote biggest impact. Bubble wrap still references a enumeration that was deprecated in 10.0 and removed in 11.0. So a darkroom uses bubble wrap, and when I do my 12.0 update, there'll probably be a pull request coming to bubble wrap to fix that enumeration. And if not me, I'm sure someone else will. But it's going to probably, I want to have this updated for ADR, so that's going to come out pretty quick. I've updated my device to GM, and all 10.0 applications will continue to work. And if you are using bubble wrap and you're targeting 10.0, or if you're using the deprecated standard libs, they will not work in the simulator, but they will work on the device. So they put the simulator strict. The device still has those older assemblies because older targeted runtimes are still supported. So contextually, I think that's the name of the app. I'm bad at that. It works on the device with iOS 12 installed, latest and greatest device, but it doesn't work in the simulator. And the reason for that is the device has all those old libraries still on there. They haven't removed it from the device, and I don't expect them to for a very long time. But they are gone from the simulator, so you will get explosions there. And then the same thing goes for the bubble wrap stuff. As long as you target 10.0, the enumeration and the enum value issues won't be a problem. And that's that. With regards to Android, I know I mentioned in the Slack channel a number of times, API 26 will be the minimum target come November. So they are, right now, the minimum target, I think, is either 22 or 23. I think it's 22, but I'm not 100% sure. 21, 20, and 19 were taken out at the end of last year, and now they're taking out everything less than 26, which means that, in essence, all Android OSs from here on out will be 64-bit also. So all things 64-bit, and I expect next year there will be no way to compile 32-bit on anything. So just be aware of that. Cool. Any questions on that stuff? So I'm doing the RubyMotion build right now, running all the smoke tests, all the things. So either tonight or tomorrow morning, a drop of RubyMotion that works against Xcode 10 GM will release.
Cool.
Will we see, if we upgrade to that, will we notice those linker warnings right away?
You'll get the warnings.
To target a specific.
You'll get them right away. You'll get them right away. And I'll it's in builder.rb, so it comes up just as a warning, and it's safe to remove. Anything below 8.0 is not even, I don't even know if you can even compile that on High Sierra. I'd have to look, but yeah, the concoctions that you would need to compile anything less than 7.0 is involved. but it's just a warning, and you will get it regardless of your deployment target.
Cool.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
So
Nothing?
yeah, I've been sort of wondering about the whole Android targeting because, and I sort of had this debate with Laurie on the Android channel a couple of weeks ago, and with the mention yesterday. I was sort of interpreting things a little differently in that today you have a minimum API version and then you have a targeted API version. And right now, I understand that in November they're going to say that your app has to be targeted at 26.
Yes.
But I'm not interpreting that as being the same as that's the minimum API level that the app has to support.
That's a fair question. Let me do my due diligence
Right. Because like
on that. Yeah, let me do my due diligence on that.
Right, because in RubyMotion we have the two config parameters. One is the API version, and then one is the targeted. And so I questioned if they're really going to move the minimum to 26.
That's quite a bold move. It is a bold move to kill off four versions of Android. It's a big deal, and I understand what you're saying from that standpoint. So yeah, let me do my due diligence on that and see what's specifically going on there. Let me do my due diligence.
Yeah.
Did you get the email also? I mean, I think they sent out the email to all Android developers with regards to if you type in, I'm sure like API 26 November, you should have seen an email blast come out. But I'll find the email and I'll verify with regards to that.
Yeah, I mean it's online too.
Yeah, and from that to that point, if it's read more leniently, what that would mean is that you must build with a version of Android Studio that uses 26 minimum. So that's another way to read that, and that seems better. So they're deprecating the tool chains under 26, not necessarily the APIs under 26. Yeah, either way, you'll be fine. It's just a matter of seeing what that looks like.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because our in essence our API target is with that definition of minimum API, we are targeting 28. The latest, our target SDA target, we're compiling with API 28 toolchains, unless you explicitly specify a previous toolchain. Cool.
Yep.
But I'll get clarification for you regardless. Any other questions, thoughts, concerns, comments?
Not for me.
Nothing for anyone else?
Not on the Xcode 10 stuff.
Or comments in general. Yeah, other comments too, if you have any other ones.
I was just...
10. You were implying that you had comments elsewhere.
I'm just, I am excited to hear more about the rest of the stuff you're going to talk about too.
Okay.
RubyMotion internals and open source initiatives.
Yeah. So RubyMotion internals / open source initiatives. The goal is still to open source the REPL. So two primary goals. The first is the REPL. The second, which is a bit more internal, but the first step to open sourcing the rest of RubyMotion, and that is called the parse.y file. Is anyone here familiar with what parse.y is? Okay, so parse the .y extension is stands for Bison. So Bison is the next version of Yak, which is yet another compiler, right? So open source, love it. And the REPL, so the REPL uses the machinery of RubyMotion, which is the REPL is independent of the REPL technology is independent of the compiler. So that part can actually be carved out and worked on independent of the compiler itself. There's one part that is linked between the both of them, and that is the actual JIT itself. But for that, you can just reference the headers are referenced, and the dlibs can just be referenced from the library RubyMotion to execute JIT if you ever need to. So the first cut of the first strong cut that can be made within RubyMotion and open sourcing it is the REPL itself, and I think that's low level, but not RubyMotion compiler low level. So it gets your feet wet. It puts you in a position where you could potentially expand the REPL to do interesting things like aside from JIT, potentially sending files to be JITted instead of a standard input stream to the device itself. But it has all the machinery you need to communicate with the device over TCP, which was a lot of work to reverse engineer and figure out, but it's done. And from here, it can only be improved. And that's the goal there. So the idea is, okay, here's your REPL. Go forth and do more awesomer things with it. With regards to minimum support and minimum functionality, that's something anyone can contribute with, but obviously that's still going to be something that I'm going to make sure is, or RubyMotion, the company, is going to make sure it works. So the REPL better freaking work, and this specifically with regards to the REPL, it's about making sure the correct dlibs and the dynamic libraries that are needed to actually run all the things for the REPL, contextual to the Xcode version you have, are in place and working. And that's just a bunch of if-else statements and then reverse engineering of some of the fat binaries that are out there to figure out what needs to be loaded up. So the minimum stuff will continue to work as it is. The additional stuff will be any enhancements the community feels like they can make to the REPL. So there's that. Plus, it kind of shows you the first step into what it's like to interact with these devices. All right, so that's the REPL. Now, with regards to parse.y, the beast that is the compiler and how to even approach the maintenance of a compiler sustainably outside of the, not necessarily outside of the reins of RubyMotion, but in the sense that it is a legitimate open source project that doesn't lean on a very few number of people that kill themselves over it, which is the current state of open source. The first step of that is how do you bring someone that doesn't know, quote unquote, anything about compiler theory, LLVM, or anything else with regards to building a language? How do you take someone that doesn't know any of that and bring them up to speed, quote unquote, over time, such that they could actually contribute to the harder pieces of the world? And the first step of that, the very, very tiny, tiny, tiny first step of this entire beast of an implementation is the parse.y file. And the parse.y file, Ruby actually has one. Ruby has one, mruby has one, jruby has one. It is essentially the thing that parses the grammar tree for Ruby. And in this case, in the case for RubyMotion, that parse tree had to diverge specifically to accommodate Android runtimes and Objective-C runtimes. So if you bring up jruby's parse tree, you're going to see some Java specific or JVM specific stuff in there. And if you bring up mRuby's parse tree, parse.y file, it's going to be different. And RubyMotion's has also diverged in the sense that its parse.y tree takes into consideration the Android NDK and the Objective-C runtime. So that's the first step. And the red-green refactor mechanism for the parse tree is you give it some bit of Ruby code, and it spits out the abstract syntax tree for that piece of Ruby code. That's what parse.y does. Okay, and so that's the first cut. And the idea there is with this first cut out there, we can then start having the conversation of, okay, how do we bring required keyword parameters into RubyMotion? Or other questions about, what if I want to introduce a concept of an annotation or attribute within RubyMotion that disables dynamic dispatch? So the idea there is like LLVM allows it, I mean, it's compiled. And yes, we have classes that allow for method missing and method redefinition by inheritance hierarchy. But this gives us an opportunity to potentially add other syntax to Ruby that better positions it to work better with LLVM. So these are at those points, is like, okay, we can have conversations about the syntax, the parse trees, the implications for bringing in something like this, everything from progressive type systems to annotations to being MRI compatible. And that is the first step with regards to open sourcing the actual runtime itself. Both of these things, the REPL and the runtime, are going to be open sourced, I'm thinking, under the name Dragon Ruby. Dragon primarily being the LLVM. The LLVM logo is a dragon, and it sounds freaking cool. Yeah. And then the logo is really straightforward. It's Ruby with a freaking cool dragon inside of it. And then everyone can get the tattoos and the bumper stickers, and it's going to be the best thing in the world. So Dragon Ruby will be the LLVM implementation of Ruby. That is the plan.
Sounds awesome.
Dragon Ruby.
Woohoo!
Ninja Ruby.
So when you say Dragon Ruby is going to be the LLVM implementation, is that is RubyMotion the only
Yes.
one that targets that? What does mRuby do?
mRuby is embedded. mRuby is a portable C implementation of Ruby.
Right.
That's the difference. So yeah, the mRuby runtime is a portable C implementation of Ruby. The difference and the value add that you get with an LLVM implementation of Ruby is that mRuby lives inside of portable C, which is great. And it's actually fast enough. I mean, I'm using it for Redacted, Nintendo Redacted. Because of my NDAs, I can't talk about my port of a darkroom to the latest and greatest Nintendo Redacted.
I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, Nintendo Redacted. So that's an mRuby, and it's working great. And the thing with that though, and it's the virtual machine. So the intermediate representation that LLVM generates is obvious, quote unquote, obviously different than the intermediate representation that lives within MRI. And that's also, well, the MRI and mRuby parity is a little bit better, but the problem there is that your intermediate representation for your language or for your runtime is that, and your speed comes from being able to optimize that intermediate representation. And with regards to with regards to MRI Ruby, there's a ceiling to that speed, and that ceiling is the intermediate representation has only so many specific types of optimizations that can be performed on it. With regards to LLVM and its intermediate representation, those optimizations also have a ceiling, but there are a lot more developers and a lot more people trying to optimize that IR. And then with the addition of potentially like Graal VM, which takes IL and then subsequently tries to optimize that IL in bitcode, you benefit from these performance enhancements simply because there are so many languages that are trying to target the LLVM intermediate representation. And that's the quote unquote big win for Dragon Ruby, is it's positioning itself in such a way that it gets optimizations for free, and it's able to interop theoretically with any library that was created with LLVM. But yes, the short version is RubyMotion is the only language that that uses LLVM, or the only implementation of Ruby.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just poking around, and I do see on GitHub somebody is working on an LLVM Ruby, Cocoa Bun, LLRB.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen that.
I have not. Laurent has a 10-year head start on it. So at least his code base has a 10-year head start. And I'm happy about that. In fact, I'll probably I'll probably reach out to him and say, hey, I know you're working on this. It's called Cocoa.
Yeah, it's K0KUBUN.
Cocoa Bomb. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, K0. Okay. I'll reach out to him. Because, I mean, if he can help with that and say, look, let's get the parse.y file out there. Let's do it. Let's go.
Right.
I like that idea. Cool.
Actually, I see there's a second project out there as well.
Yeah.
With a whole team on it.
So there's, I know there's one, so there's an mruby.
Oh yeah.
There's a proof of concept.
Old. Ruby LLVM.
Ruby LLVM. Okay.
Yeah.
And same deal there. We can look at the commit histories and kind of look at what they're trying to do with regards to, contextual to Android, iOS, and LLVM in a general sense.
Yeah.
But that's a great idea. I'll reach out to these teams and see what we can pull off there with regards to convergence. And yeah, they probably have fixed things that I'm struggling with, and vice versa.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, the Ruby LLVM one, its last release was over 3 years ago, so I'm not sure how serious they are about that one.
I saw that, but the last commits were 14 days ago, so...
Yeah.
So it's still being maybe worked on by a few people. Okay. No, this is good to know. No, it's just generally good to know. With regards to the shift that needs to happen with Ruby and the Ruby culture in general, this is a harder conversation to have with everyone, and it goes back to frankly Lisp. When someone says they're working on a new language, or they're working, or specifically a heavily parenthesized language, they say they're working on a Lisp. And the premise there is that when they say that, one, it's okay to say it. And two, it's okay to say it because no one's making any assumptions with regards to parity with another Lisp. So when I say like Shez scheme versus closure versus Lisp 1 versus Lisp 0, all of them are Lisps, but there's no requirement, expectation, surprise when, from a logical standpoint, or even a code sharing standpoint, things just don't work the same. And so the challenge here is that JRuby, and I think it's just a matter of waiting longer, but JRuby, MRuby, and MRI Ruby and RubyMotion are all Rubies. And we have to start, I hate to say it, but start accepting that that's what it is. It's not, the goal isn't for MRI compatibility per se. Obviously you want to try to be a Ruby. If you start having curly braces for your beginning and end of a function, you're no longer a Ruby. But yeah, thinking of it as more as a Ruby, as opposed to Ruby for MRI Ruby for iOS, or MRI Ruby for blah, 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 blah. And the reason I say that is because then we can have a Ruby where parentheses are required. And if you return a function without parentheses, that is implicitly converted to a proc or a lambda, right? So these are the ideas of talking about a Ruby as opposed to MRI Ruby. And one of the larger goals for Dragon Ruby is to start pushing that narrative, specifically around, hey, if you put this annotation on this method, this means that this method cannot be redefined. It cannot be overridden. It can't be method missingified or any variation of that. And with the loss of that flexibility, you gain speed. Because now I don't have to worry about dynamic dispatch. Something like that. And that is a very real low-hanging piece of fruit that a compiled Ruby like LLVM Ruby or Dragon Ruby can take full advantage of. So I don't know how that conversation will go. I don't know what the reception will be about that, but the first step is to get parse.y out there. That is the very first step to even begin to have these kind of conversations. So REPL and parse.y, end of 2018, early 2019 is what I'm looking at. I've already bought dragonruby.org. I'm starting to buy up the domains, buy up the trademarks, what have you, the implied organizations and all that stuff. And then any charitable stuff or any charitable entities will potentially be built around that too. So that's the general goal there. And of course, RubyMotion is your Red Hat style supported aspect of, or long-term will be that supported aspect of Dragon Ruby. And it's also the funding mechanism with regards to the income that comes in. Some of that can be reallocated to the growth of said project. So that is the exciting but very, very slowly executed, careful plan that is Dragon Ruby. And again, it's just more, it has to be sustainable. That is my biggest concern. It has to be sustainable. I can't just open source it and then be the only one working on it. That's no better than what it is now. It has to be sustainable, and personally, I feel that the Ruby community in a whole does not realize the amount of burden and weight the core Ruby team currently holds. Keyword arguments alone, if the greater Ruby community looked at keyword arguments and just the commit to parse.y, just the commit to the grammar file, for the love of all that is wonderful, just the commit to the grammar file, I guarantee you that if the entire Ruby community saw that and they would have said, you know what, Mats, don't kill yourself over this. We'll just pass in a dictionary. We're cool. We don't need keyword arguments. Don't worry about that. I think the commit almost increased parse.y by 20%, just for keyword arts. And it seems so trivial. You're like, it's just a colon. How hard can it be? You're like, yeah. That's the problem, is that it is hard. And if people saw that, if the greater Ruby community could talk poor, nice Matts out of doing this kind of stuff and say, don't do it. Just, we don't need it. We're fine. We are fine. We love you. We love the language. Please don't work on this again. Please don't do this again. And the sad part is that he's doing it in mRuby now, and the team is doing it in mRuby. And if you look at the fork or the branch that they have for that, it's madness. I almost want to say, like, don't do it. Just, mRuby's great. We'll use the dictionary with a splat, and I can do the merge on my end. We don't need keyword arguments. But this is a problem, and sustainable open source in that sense is a very big problem. And I don't know the answer, but
I mean, isn't that essentially what they did in Python?
Keyword arguments, or don't do it?
Basically taking a dictionary and splatting it. They
did, but the thing is, though, is that we didn't do that in Ruby, and it's beautiful that we have keyword arguments in Ruby, but the effort with regards to the payoff as a whole, I mean, from the core team, they love it, and they love Ruby, and they'll do it because they love it. But it's tough to have a narrative when you have someone that doesn't understand parse.y and the impact going, where's our keyword arguments? Come on, give us keyword arguments. So ugly that I have to pass in a dictionary. And if they just have the contextual knowledge of be pragmatic, look at this. Yes, we can add it. One, are you going to help? And two, is it worth it given one, the complexity and the technical debt? Because we just increased the grammar for Ruby by 20% for this potentially syntax sugar. And it's that conversation that I think if we had a larger part of the Ruby community talking in, we would have talked them off that ledge a long time ago. But yeah, so that is my biggest concern, and that's why it's moving slowly, is that it's got to be sustainable. And I'm trying to make steps to make sure it's sustainable. All right, off my soapbox. I'm sorry. Any thoughts, concerns, questions, or?
So it's just a little tangent, but
tangents are good.
My understanding was that RubyMotion implemented the keyword arguments to match Objective-C syntax.
It did.
Right.
It did.
So, and that was before, or right around the same time that the core Ruby was doing that as well.
Yeah. So there's already some divergence, and now the required keywords are something that are around the corner. And syntactically, I think it's incompatible with what we have now. So it's that same conversation of this is a Ruby, not necessarily the Ruby.
Right.
Yep. And the thing is that, yeah, for Objective-C, it made perfect sense. And then that additional example of it is compiled. LLVM Ruby or Ruby Dragon Ruby is compiled. So we can take advantage of that, such as bypassing dynamic dispatch or some other various things if the correct hints are in there. And dare I say, even do some form of progressive typing, again, because we are compiled. So maybe we can guarantee this value will be an int, and you will get a compiler error by putting a type hint in there about this value always and must always be an int. So yes, you're absolutely right. And those divergences are there, and it's a thing. It's a thing we have to be okay with, I think, and that is a harder conversation to have. So think on that conversation. Think about it. Make peace with it, maybe. I think I'm saying make peace with it because it's happening.
Oh, I don't have to make peace with it. I'm good with it. It just, of course, we all see these through our own experience, and you're talking a lot about how people need to know, need to learn about stuff, and I see that as maybe we need another whole stream in the school about some of this stuff, just so when people start complaining or want to, we can go, hey, go watch
right
this.
there. The source code,
just go watch this video, and then you can go to source code and you can do it.
Yeah. I've had people that said, how hard can it be? I'm like, all right, I want you to try to create a language on LLVM that prints the number 1 in a console. And and I pointed to the llvm.org/docs/tutorial. It's 80 pages long, but it took me 2 months to reason through that and get to a point where I'm like, yes, I understand what all this is now. 80 pages in 2 months. That's a thing. And it's hard. We're right now Ruby developers, just picking on Ruby, mostly all developers that are not compiler and language developers cannot empathize at that level because they haven't been exposed to it. So this is an attempt to slowly trickle and expose people to that and provide a trail that those that want to get into it can follow in a consumable fashion. But with regards to the course curriculum, I would say get Ruby under a microscope. It's it's a little outdated now, but high level, generally speaking, it's a fantastic book about what the Ruby source code represents and how it works and how the virtual machine works and how do you build up from the Bison file to the virtual machine to eigen classes and that entire hierarchy and how that all links into C structures and everything. So it's very good. And it gives you that good primer to begin empathizing and being part of a more constructive conversation. Okay. As opposed to I want. Any other thoughts, Dan? I'm sorry if I hijacked your tangent and got back on my soapbox.
No, that's. Well, I mean, I was just kind of curious. One, if there was any reason why it had to be implemented that way instead of using just like a hash, like you were saying. And also if the way that was implemented in an MRI differs from the way that was implemented in this RubyMotion.
So I think the two primary motivations back when this was implemented was one, when it came to reading documentation, we wanted, I say we, but I wasn't part of the team, but I'll say we as in we, the company. We wanted to make sure that when it came to reading Objective-C documentation, the parity was there, especially for delegates and callbacks. So when you saw the dual Objective-C approach to naming parameters, it felt like a very mechanical conversion as opposed to inserting an arbitrary set of like braces or other variants such as that. So that competed, unfortunately, with being as compatible as possible with MRI. And a part of that contention there were compromises. Why it fell one way as opposed to the other, I couldn't say. I'd have to look at the commit history and see what's in there. But another motivating factor was that this was a derivation or hard fork of MacRuby. So even the implementation of the keyword arguments the way they were in Objective-C were probably heavily biased towards Apple and their motivations with regards to the language. So that might have also contributed to some of the divergence that you see now. And so now the question is, one, do we converge? And two, what is that convergence if we decide to? And that is a conversation that we have to have at some point. Yep.
All right.
In short, I have no idea. I don't know, man. I don't know why it's like that.
I always
There's
thought that the RubyMotion implementation of keyword arguments to match the Cocoa APIs or whatever you call it, method.
Yeah, the named
signatures.
functions. Yeah.
I thought that was a clever way of accepting keyword arguments.
It was nice. Yes, I agree.
But thinking about how RubyMotion could support the the Ruby MRI implementation of keyword arguments, I don't see how it could be possible and continue to support the Objective-C APIs.
Well, with regards to possibility, it's the same idea of annotation. So if you think about a JavaScript file, at the top of it, you can put option strict, and suddenly the JavaScript compiler or whatever will say, if you don't define a var variable in front of it, sorry. So some variant of that could potentially exist where you could say parens required at the top of a file, or parens required at the top of a function, and it would fail syntax because of that opt-in or opt-out. But it sounds great. And then you're like, all right, what are the implications and the impact just to the very, very first file, which is parsed out y? And that in itself is terrifying to even begin to think of. So there's always a way. It's just a matter of, holy crap, like what are you potentially getting yourself into by doing that? Yep. So if no one has anything else, I want to show you the insanity, one part of the insanity that is parsed out y, just so you realize how insane parsed out y is. But I only want to do that towards the end so we can all just kind of have a moment of silence, mourn, and then pretend we never saw it. So you wait.
Well, I was just going to say, I know none of us want to think this, but, Apple has this really dreadful habit of taking things that people are using, important things, and going, okay, fuck it, we're done.
Yeah.
And throwing them away.
You gotta be careful. Yep.
So going, well, we can't, we couldn't break the Objective-C compatibility. Well, Objective-C might not be there one day.
Yep.
So,
yeah. With regards to RubyMotion and how it works internally, right now it relies on the Objective-C runtime specifically for garbage collection, and what at that point, and frankly, what I think is still a benefit of a unified type system, being that a Ruby string is an NS string, is an NS string, is an NS string, NS string. So part of this conversion with regards to Dragon Ruby and expanding out of it is we stop using Objective-C's garbage collection capabilities and instead go with more of a generalized GC, such as what MRI has, the market suite, and some of those other variations. That's part one. Second part is the Objective-C runtime is a C library. Think of it as mRuby. So, and the Objective-C runtime in itself is open source. So absolute worst case, we're talking absolute worst case. What happens is that the GC, all the things that RubyMotion currently runs on for the Objective-C runtime, come with RubyMotion. What you lose is the type unification. So at that point, you get the layer on top that says it's a Ruby string, which maps to this other brand new runtime that they created string property. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. The other part, and what I have generally used as a canary in the coal mine, right? I think that's what it is /library/bridge support. So that directory is a representation of Apple's commitment to interoperability. So the day I stop seeing changes in that, or the day I see that being removed, is a bad day. With regards to OS High Sierra, there were changes in it, and they were all good changes, and they were all updates and refactorings, and it was massive. So if you look at library.rubymotion, there's bridge support and bridge support 2. Just do a file diff between the two, and you can see the effort that Apple has put into consolidating and making sure that that construct continues to work and work well and improve. Big thing is the improvement, because they actually improve the code. So that's your canary in the coal mine. I have to look at Mojave. I'm surprised I haven't looked at it yet, but that's what you want to look at, and that's what you want to keep a pulse on. And obviously, I'm concerned with this stuff too, because I've got a lot of apps that are built in RubyMotion, and they are my livelihood. That keeps me from going back to .NET and PowerShell. So I do not ever want to be in a position where I have to do that. But as it stands right now, the risks are low, and there are escape hatches that I've thought a whole lot about. And the worst case escape hatch right now is quite literally taking the Objective-C runtime and losing the capability to directly map to NSString. At that point, though, you get the benefit, quote unquote benefit there, is you get MRI compatibility. So you get MRI string functions and MRI's dictionary functions as opposed to Objective-C's dictionary functions. You lose documentation, but you gain documentation because it's already on the other end. But yeah, and the funny thing is that I'm actually trying to see if I can actually get the Objective-C runtime on redacted. Because of, or redacted reasons of redacted. And it's theoretically redacted.
Well, you can guess our reaction to that.
Redacted.
Redacted. So that's also going to be very interesting for RubyMotion if that redaction occurs, to redact that. Any other thoughts, concerns, questions? So, I mean, it was a good question, and keep asking it. And I'm always highly sensitive to that. Highly sensitive. And from that same standpoint, hedge your bets from the perspective of, like, if you're still not comfortable with the response I gave you, talk with me and we'll figure something out. If you can't, then, you know, I'm here as a steward and I'm helping you try to find the best thing for you. And a part of that, if that means having, which is theoretically possible, having a Ruby file, an Objective-C file, and a Swift file side by side in an Xcode project, if that's what that means, you know, and that's something that I'm still trying to move towards for the other direction so that people come to RubyMotion. But it also gives you the warms and fuzzies of being able to go the other direction also. So that's another rabbit in the hat that I'm working towards too. So okay. I'm very sensitive to it. Anything else? All right. So let me show you parse.y. Okay. Last piece. This is a brace yourself moment. Are you sure? Do we have any final last words before you see the madness of this file. All right.
The only other thing on our list was that I was going to give an update on the reactive components framework that I'm.
Yes, do that, because
on,
if you do it afterwards, it's going to just make us very sad. We're just our hearts are going to be low.
I don't necessarily need to give. There isn't a whole lot of updating to give, so.
Okay.
I don't mind skipping it unless somebody else really wants to hear about it.
So for what it's worth, I do have a minion working on what we talked about as far as like the grid layout and what have you. Just to give you an idea of, I'll put this in Slack.
Let's see.
So I'm just going to post this in the meetup. The idea here is, again, I'm trying to figure out what a successful app's UI looks like. And there's a lot of things you can do with auto layout, constraints, layout engines, et cetera, et cetera. There's the way I'm telling you to do it, the correct way, and then what everyone attempts to try. So this overlay is about finding a grid that you can snap, quote unquote, snap to the edges to, such that your UI is interactable. You're interacting with components that you can actually touch pleasantly and actually use, as opposed to some of the crazy things that you could potentially do with UI stuff. So there you have it. Sorry.
Cool. So I was just working on trying to get just a simple example working, and I'm just kind of working one piece at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Given a XML file that looks like this, UI button with a label and an action with a count that updates the count here. Haven't been working on parsing here, but assuming that I have this structure, I've been working my way down.
If you want a good parsing capability that supplements sustainable open source, take a look at Bison. Please take a look at Bison.
At one point, I was trying a few different libraries, and I didn't look at Bison.
Take a look at Bison.
I have a feeling you're being a little bit sarcastic.
No, I'm not. Everyone uses it. Everyone uses Bison.
Sure. But there are some other frameworks.
Objective-C uses Yak.
Ruby DXLs.
Yeah, Objective-C uses Yak. Ruby, the language, uses Bison. It's like the parser with regards to syntax and syntax trees and stuff like that. But I digress. Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, I haven't gotten to the parsing part yet. At one point, I had a little spike that I was doing working on the parsing part, but I'm going the other direction right now. So then I get to a main view controller, trying to figure out how to integrate components. So right now I've just got it so that you, I guess you start with your root component and you call render and then attach the view. And then from there, it updates itself. So actually, I think I was thinking I was doing it this other way, but anyway. And in my library here, assuming that I'm initializing these things, well, I can look up the components dynamically, which I haven't really gotten too much yet. And the component, assuming you've got a component that's just, you've defined your method, your template needs, I've got this button tapped. When I tap on this, it should trigger this method and it should update the count, and I shouldn't have to do anything. It should just happen automatically. So I've got this tap counter component, got a bunch of stuff commented out, which is maybe a future DSL or something. But right now I've just got a simple method that updates the tap count. And what happens is, assuming that there's been some stuff that's compiled, you end up with some extra code at compile time when you render your components. I didn't define any layouts, so this is kind of getting to what you were talking about with the grid. I started working with a stack view, a UI stack view with a vertical axis. So assuming, I was kind of trying to approach this like a how you would assume HTML would work. Like you just start putting in elements and they're vertical by default, full width, like, these are block level elements. That's kind of what I was thinking of when I was approaching this. And so I was playing around with UI stack views a little bit because I haven't dealt with those much. And there's all sorts of interesting alignment options. So I ended up with something that looked like this, which is really different than what I was planning on. I was kind of assuming that these would be equally spaced out here, and that they're anchored to the top and the bottom. So got to figure out how to.
So then I know we've talked about it, but contextually to what Andrew was talking about, and the stack views and whatnot, if you look at the grid that I set up inside of, or the screenshot of the grid, the idea there is that you had the tap me button. You pick what square it starts on and what square it ends on, and that's it. You do not get to make it bigger, smaller than that variant. It is snapped to that size, and that location, whether it's G3, like on a chessboard kind of thing. So if your button is placed at G3 with size 2, that is it. You do not get to, do not deviate, that's it. That's all you get. And the idea there is that it's around this premise that there are constraints on the successful UIs, and the really, really good apps out there, they follow these specific constraints with regards to, don't create things that you interact with that are smaller than 50 pixels. If you have a horizontal array of buttons, people have a propensity to put their thumb parallel to an imaginary line below those buttons. So if you have buttons that are, if their width is smaller than their thumb, then you've put them in a position where they have to kind of look around their thumb to tap something. So if you have a horizontal array of buttons, it's 2 apiece. So if you look at the grid, you've got 6 across. So that means you have 3 interactable areas with regards to buttons, and that's it. You do not, quote unquote, do not deviate from that, or deviate at your own risk. And the idea there is that it's this type of guidance that, because you can't do anything, it simplifies stuff, and it actually just makes things, makes life a little bit easier from the perspective of, this is how you create a UI, please do it this way, and you'll be better off because of it. With regards to creating the grid and finding the ideal snapped values and the sizes of the squares based on how far up you are versus how far down you are versus device size, that's what I'm still trying to find the perfect recipe for. but the idea there then is that you have a coordinate that you start at, and then a coordinate that you end at, and that's it. It's opinionated, and I'm still talking with Andrew about it, just trying to get his ideas. But again, this is just based off of what I've seen, quote unquote, work in apps that have done this really well, and what I've been able to distill based on those UIs that I keep seeing over and over again. And they all follow this kind of, even though they can do anything under the sun, they constrain themselves to this kind of grid, hard-coded, fixed size grid system, simply because we're touching the screen and tapping, and the devices are small, and it just quote unquote works for them. So not going to dissuade you, Andrew, not trying to, but I'm just showing you, at least at a minimum, this will be an overlay, so people understand that if your thing is shorter than this thing, or if it's shorter or skinnier than this thing, then anything in this grid, you are asking for trouble.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay.
So the last thing that I was working on was getting this so that it re-renders every time I update the attribute. So essentially, this should re-render every time the state is updated, and as I tap this, it re-renders every time. Mm-hmm. Only got 2 elements, so obviously it's fast, but it feels kind of cool that it's that part is kind of working as expected.
Another thing,
this is all kind of sample code right now, so it's
really another thing with regards to this grid and the concept of reflow that you're potentially dealing with, it may actually quote unquote kind of work with the grid in the sense that you can control the areas of reflow by not necessarily having maybe an ancestry chain or like a hierarchy of controls. You could just say, if this button is clicked, your reflow will happen on rows 2 and 3. So your DOM elements, or your fixed elements that are ever changing, are snapping to this weird pixel coordinate system. It's so odd, but it might benefit you. So something weird to think about with regards to reflow everything in this vicinity, as opposed to thinking about reflow everything under this component hierarchy.
Yeah.
Weird. Dumb idea, maybe, but there you have it. Yay. All right. So this will only take like 5 minutes, if that. I'm going to find the line. Brace yourself. Get your stiff drink ready afterwards, because. Oof. All right. Here's the line. I will post it in the Meetup.
You want to share your screen?
I'm just going to post it in the Meetup. I want to see your faces. I'm just kidding. Everyone see the line?
Wait, is that just percent signs? No.
Yes, you are right. It is / asterisk %% asterisk /. Take that in.
I'm waiting for the page to load, but I didn't believe it when I first saw it. I'm not even sure what that's for.
I asked the same question for about a week until I figured it out. A week, mind you. So this is, again, the grammar file for Ruby. It has almost 11,000 lines in it. So if you think about the parse tree for Ruby, you should look at the before and after before keyword arguments, and you will have told Matt, you should have never done this. Why did you do this? Anyways, so yes, / asterisk, %, asterisk /. Okay, so this is a grammar with this parse.y file and bison. You can take some Ruby syntax, send it through this thing, and you get back a abstract syntax tree. That is the goal of this file. So in previous meetups, I talked about Ripper, R-I-P-P-E-R. It's a gem, and you can do ripper.s expressions and give it some arbitrary Ruby code, and it will give you a parse tree, a pre-printed Rubyified construct that is the parse tree for what you sent in there. Okay, so you've got a parse.y file that parses stuff, but there's also this Ripper gem that parses stuff. How do they share code? They have to have, I mean, especially when you're dealing with 10,000 lines, how do you share 10,000 lines of code? You can't. Unless you put in these marker elements inside of your parse.y file that when it's built is used to generate another file that is used by Ripper to compile what it does and do its thing. So in an attempt to avoid duplication of 10,000 lines of potential grammar and lexer and parsing, marker entries were added to parse.y such that a build process later on down the road can find these markers, pull the code out between those markers, manipulate it in such a way that Ripper could also benefit from these said markers, from these said lines of code. And what you are seeing there, my friends, is exactly that.
So these are basically some special comments that are read by some other thing to pull this stuff out to
so that we don't have code duplication in two places.
And that one too.
Begin and end.
It's the same thing, but without the center % sign. As with a space instead.
This is the madness. This is the madness. So when you ask for keyword args, keep just this little tidbit in mind. But this is the reality of the situation. And these are some of the smartest people, smartest developers in the world that couldn't think of a better option. Right. There you have it. All right, everyone got their stiff drink. It's like, yep, that's it for me. Wow, that's what I said.
It was pretty bad, but I think I might have seen worse somewhere. It's still pretty bad, though.
Well, I've seen worse, but not in something that is used so extensively.
Yes, we use this. This is a thing. So there you have it.
It's pretty crazy.
and I try to give them the benefit of the doubt, saying like, this is the best option, given all the options they had, given all the ways that they could potentially mitigate this problem, with all the brain power that was there. I have to trust that this was the best option given the alternatives.
All right, well, I have to drop off, so
yeah, it's 11 o'clock here. Yeah, that's one of those like, all right, that was the most depressing moment of my life. I'm just gonna go to sleep now.
I think I've seen worse too.
All right. Well, you have a good one, Dave. I'll keep in touch with you with regards to the testing stuff that you have for the Android. After I get through Apple Christmas, I promise I'll get to it.
Yeah, no worries, no rush.
Okay. All right.
Yep. Thanks for joining.
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry, that was a kill buzz. That was a kill buzz. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Okay.
All right.
Interesting tidbit.
All right. Take care. See ya.
All right.
See you guys. Thanks,
Bye.
Andrew.
Yep. See you next time.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.